Hello, everyone. This is the Know Your Place podcast. On this week's episode, I'm going to be talking about sporting nationalism and what it looks like in Europe and the United States. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Altendorf, and we're here on episode 22 of the Know Your Place podcast. And on this week's episode, because I love to stay relevant, I thought I'd bring in sort of a topic that I have kind of found interesting for years, and that's sort of the culture behind sports and sort of we're going to talk about it in the context of sort of nationalism or getting behind a national team in sports. And the reason why I'm talking about it, of course, this week is because we're going to see the wrap up of the World Cup here in the last few days. And the last four teams that are left are definitely teams that the countries have very strong identities with, having Belgium, France, Croatia, and England. Um, these are national teams that the countries are very much behind. And I also want to compare that to American culture and that sort of thing. So let's sort of run this down a bit, okay? So the reason why I think, just initially, when we talk about the subject matter, obviously soccer's national thing, and it is kind of a big deal, I guess, to our women's team, people do care about because our women's team has won a lot, so I do think some people get excited about that. But in general, I would say the average American is still warming up to the idea of celebrating an American national soccer team, which is understandable. I mean, it's not our main sport. Most people don't watch soccer, but a lot more are than they used to, so. And why do I think that's important? Well, the only thing I can say to why the nationalism becomes a big deal or why people get so excited about sports is, for me, it's always been about sort of the memories as a kid. Now, for me, it's a more regional thing, and I'll get into this more later on because when we talk about America, I think that it's more of a regional thing. But growing up, I live in Kentucky now, but my family is from Wisconsin. And, in Wisconsin, the Green Bay Packers are a very big deal and very much part of the culture because they're different. They claim to be a different kind of team, one that's more built around the community. And they've won a lot of titles. And you just have so many fond memories of moments you shared with people. And you take pride in that. And, in some ways, maybe it is a bit misguided. I don't know. But, so I get the feeling of a sports fan. Because I often hear people now, it's real trendy to say, why does anybody care about sports? Meh, meh, meh. But I get the feeling, man. You have fond memories with your family and friends, or where you were when your team finally did something, or, like I'll never forget. We actually didn't watch the Super Bowl that Brett Favre won because we were traveling that day and we had no way to watch it. So I actually had to watch it replayed. We had the VCR set to replay it, and we watched it, when we finally got to where we got back home. So I didn't get to watch it live. I just had to find out in the paper next day. I mean, I was a little kid. I was only I think it was 8 or 9 years old, but I didn't see it happen live, even though I was the most dedicated fan you could imagine. Not the most. There's tons of Packers fans, but I knew all their stories. I still have a very deep affection for Brett Favre and Reggie White. I look up to sort of the way they handled themselves on and off the field. So why this leads me all into talking about Europe is, now imagine I have these fond feelings, but in America, while we do still identify strongly with states, there still is a strong state thing. States don't fight wars against other states. States don't have they have some political clout in America, but they don't have the same amount of clout as a country. So, why this is a big deal is when you project this nationalism onto a country, the ramifications can get quite serious. And we'll talk a bit about the Olympics later, but that's where it seems like it even manifests itself more intensely than the World Cup, you know, where you have all kinds of headlines about people boycotting other countries because they're hosting this, or, you know, should we even accept medals or go? Just all kinds of crazy things. Or like, should we boycott because a poor country isn't doing enough to help its poor and hosting one of these events? I mean, the Olympics really gets bogged down a lot in the political mire, in my opinion. But I want to get into the World Cup now that I've gotten into this podcast. So with the World Cup, I think it's a big deal to Europeans more so than anything else. Yes, it is a big deal to Brazilians and Argentinians too, because they're two of the what we call the big four, But Europe is where soccer started, and these countries see a lot of identity in their players, and I'm sure they grow up, looking at their players like I did, Brett Favre and Reggie White, and they remember the fond memories of when their countries did something great. Like people in World Cup lore, like we're talking about Croatia, right? There's a lot of people still celebrating when Croatia just came in third in 1998. Croatia's never won, right? And that's because it's such a big deal to them, right? They're this tiny country who broke away from Yugoslavia, and they've not really they see their identity in this. They see their identity in what they're doing now, and that can also be true of. We'll also dive into sort of Germany. They got eliminated this year early, but they when they won in 1990, it was right after they had reunified, and it was kind of a hard concept because Germany, of course, has felt a lot of baggage from World War II, and probably rightfully so. But the psyche was like, we want to celebrate this. We should be celebrating this. This is a victory for our country. We've just had the best team in the world at soccer in this competition. But should we be playing the national anthem? Should we be rocking the flags everywhere? Is it wrong to take pride in this? And when they won again in 2014, it still was an issue after all this time, because they don't, there is a big pride that comes with winning this thing, It's you get to say that you're best in the world at something for 4 years, I guess. And I don't really know how to explain that to someone that doesn't understand how people identify with sports. It's I guess it's a bit of an escape for us from the daily political realities, right? Because at the end of the day, hopefully, most of the time, these players and fans just walk off the field and everything's okay afterward. They don't hang around and get in fights. They sometimes get in fights, but all-out wars don't happen from this. And it's good. I guess it's a good way in some ways to relieve the tension, right? You can make fun of other countries and the way their soccer team played, but at the end of the day, no one's firing bullets at anybody, so it's pretty cool. I also want to talk about the Croatian one because that's another very controversial subject. I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet lately. Of course, every time they celebrate pride in their country, people bring back what happened there in the 40s, and it's probably just as controversial as Germany. And that's, of course, because their checkerboard flag, sort of represents a regime a lot of people consider on par with the Nazis. So it's a sticky situation, but they should, I guess, I don't know what the rules are. Maybe you all can tell me in the comments section. Shouldn't you be allowed to celebrate when your country's team is doing well at a sport? I mean, can't we just lay aside all the baggage and just accept that these people are going to celebrate that? I don't know. Some people will probably say no. But I don't know. Maybe those people are missing something. Missing some kind of experience that they can get something out of. So anyway, yeah, that's that. And then, of course, England, their fan base is very rabid because they feel like they invented the game of soccer, and they feel like they have the most popular league in soccer, and they haven't won the title now in over a half decade. So it's a bit of a lovable losers kind of thing, and they feel like they're owed one. And I guess I don't really blame them, but the fact of the matter is you have to accept that your team doesn't win sometimes. So yeah, it's very fascinating. What's also fascinating about the World Cup that makes it different than what I'm used to is growing up an NFL or an NBA fan is we have a new winner every year, whereas in the World Cup you have to wait 4 years. And often that means nobody repeats. The same teams aren't as good the next time around because they're just getting old, man. And it really it gets wild. It's totally there is a lot of parity and it's pretty exciting for the most part. Okay, so now I want to talk about how it's different in America. So our main sports, the NFL and the NBA, we don't play internationally largely. There is some international play in with basketball, but we do line up a national team for the Olympics, okay, and people do root for that, but it's not the same. You grow up as a kid, and this is because obviously we're a much larger country than all of the countries in Europe. They're all really subdivided. So it's really kind of similar and kind of different, right? We have our regional things we grow up with, and that's really what people root for, like me and the Packers with Wisconsin. And, I meet a lot of people from Texas, of course, that are Dallas Cowboys fans and, Minnesota Vikings fans and all kinds of things like that. But it's a real strong regional identity. You rock their colors, you wear them everywhere, and it's about the region more so than the country. And in some ways, it's about that with England in the Premier League. I mean, I do think people are fans of the national team, but I can definitely tell in England with the Premier League, it is also about your regional team. Um, Especially with I've seen stuff about people with Liverpool and Manchester United and Manchester City. It's even crazy. One city's that divided. Um, so it's a regional thing, and it's part of the culture. You go to it's how you interact and you hang out with people and you become part of the culture. So you root for the regional team, and that's how you meet. That's how you get in. And with some of these smaller countries like Belgium and Croatia, that's the only thing they have to get behind. And that's why it's so exciting for them. And that's why I think even though there is a bit of baggage there with Croatia, we shouldn't be so quick to judge their excitement. I mean, they're a little raw and rough around the edges, but it's just so exciting for them to be such a tiny country and be so relevant. So yeah, it's cool. And the last thing I want to talk about is, of course, now the Olympics kind of goes to another level because every country competes in the Olympics, but it's usually dominated by sort of the big and the powerful. You know, China, the United States, Russia, sometimes the United Kingdom, sometimes Germany. So, yeah, we do get behind our national team, but I don't know, it doesn't feel the same as sort of rooting for your regional team in football, American football, or rooting for soccer in the World Cup, because it's across multiple sports and they compete for medals and it's individual athletes. Yeah, they're a team per se and there are team events, but it doesn't feel the same as just a team that's played together. And for instance, I was rooting for Germany for the last few years, and it was just amazing to watch them grow up together, work so hard for that goal, and come so close, and then finally win it in 2014 under that core group of guys. And with the Olympics, there's so many people coming in and out. Yeah, it was cool for me watching Michael Phelps compete in, what was it, 4 Olympics in a row and win all those medals. That's pretty interesting. But it's not the same. The team doesn't grow up in quite the same way. They're not all parts together all the time. They're apart, they're working with different people all the time, and they're competing in different kinds of events. And it just doesn't I guess as a fan, you feel like you're really a part of a team when you're rooting for somebody like the Green Bay Packers or somebody like Croatia, or you see their struggles. You feel like you're on the field there with them, going through it. So it's really cool, and I think it's an all right thing. As for the Olympics, I guess it's still relevant. It's still cool to reward the best quote athletes in the world every 4 years. But man, I tell you, I barely watched the last Winter Olympics. I didn't even really care. And prior to that, I barely watched the Summer Olympics in Rio. So, and they say the ratings are way down. I think they've said that before, but I just have a tough time believing that people care as much and they get as excited about it. Because it's. I think the big thing is okay. I'm not saying that the World Cup and the NFL became pretty politicized this last season, but largely both things are not as politicized as the Olympics. I mean, whenever they even talk about who's hosting it, what they're going to do with it, the politics just instantly come out. There's all kinds of countries talking about boycotts, and it doesn't seem like anybody just rises above it for the competition. I mean, they do, but they don't at the same time. It's like the press seems to be so much more heated about the politics behind those than the World Cup or the NFL to me. Maybe I'm misreading that, but it does seem like it's much more heated, and I think that's a turnoff for the fans. I'm not saying athletes can't have opinions. I mean, it's cool that, I think it's all right for athletes to have opinions, but if the sports competition becomes more about the politics outside the competition than actually a competition, yeah, I think you're going to lose a few fans. So that's my advice, is to can't we just enjoy the sports for the sports and enjoy the nationalism for the nationalism? And maybe sometimes nationalism does go a bit too far, but sometimes little countries got to have something. If Croatia or Belgium manages to pull out the win here after this week is over, I think they deserve to celebrate it and be happy about taking home a title against such a stiff worldwide competition, being such small countries. So there you go. Thank you all for joining me, and we'll talk next week. Check out the Know Your Place podcast on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/knowyourplacepodcast, all one word, or on Facebook at facebook.com/knowyourplacepodcast, all one word. And we will be coming soon to YouTube and iTunes, and maybe another social media platform near you. Special thanks to my wife, Sarah, and Jay Graff for the riff.